In the 1980s and 90s, winning an election in some parts of India did not always require winning the trust of voters. Sometimes it required reaching the polling booth before the voters actually did. Armed groups would enter polling stations, intimidate officials, prevent ordinary citizens from voting, and fill the ballot boxes themselves. Thousands of people could technically have their votes recorded without ever actually casting their votes. India even created a term for this phenomenon, booth capturing. This is a forgotten chapter of Indian democracy because an entire generation of Indians have grown up in a completely different election system. Today, almost after every major election, there is one debate that reignites: electronic voting machines. Some political parties and leaders argue that India should abandon EVMs and return to paper ballots. But there is one problem with this argument. India has already lived through the age of ballot papers. Not for 5 years or not for 10 years, but for more than 5 decades. And the reason why India moved away from the paper was not because the ballot paper failed as an idea. In fact, the ballot paper helped create Indian democracy. India moved away because after conducting some of the largest elections in human history, we discovered that paper had its own vulnerabilities. It involved violence, invalid votes, stolen ballot papers, logistical failures, counting disputes, and a simple reality. In a country with hundreds of millions of voters, even small problems can become enormous. So the question is not whether paper feels more trustworthy. The real question is, why did the world's largest democracy spend decades trying to replace the ballot paper? And here is where the story begins. To understand this story, we have to go back to the beginning when India became a republic. India's first general election.
What follows here is the record of such a people, the people of our nation who played a worthy, active part in a great experiment, the experiment of free India's first general elections. The aims and ideals that became reality on our attaining independence were well expressed through the adult franchise clause incorporated in our constitution.
Today we take Indian democracy for granted. Elections happen every 5 years, governments change, and hundreds of millions of people come out to vote. But when India became independent, many people across the world believed this experiment would collapse. India as a democracy was a laughable idea. India had just survived the partition, millions had been displaced, the country was extremely poor, and around 85% of Indians could not read or write at that time. The argument against Indian democracy was simple. How can a country where most people cannot even read a candidate's name choose its own government? India chose a completely different path when it implemented the universal adult franchise. Every adult citizen could vote. A farmer in a village had the same political power as a wealthy businessman from Bengaluru. It was one of the greatest acts of faith placed in ordinary people. But turning this ideal into reality was a nightmare nonetheless. This responsibility went to India's first Chief Election Commissioner, Sukumar Sen. Sen was a mathematician and an administrator who was suddenly asked to solve a problem nobody had solved before. How do you conduct an election for roughly 176 million eligible voters spread across mountains, deserts, forests, and thousands of villages? Because most voters could not read, India created one of the most innovative election systems in the world. Symbols, the lamp, elephant, a pair of bullocks, objects that every Indian could recognize very easily, even being illiterate. During the first general elections, each candidate actually had a separate ballot box with their symbol displayed on it. A voter would receive a ballot paper and place it into the box of their chosen candidate. Today, it sounds very unusual, but for the India of the 1950s, it was genius. The Election Commission needed 19 lakh ballot boxes. around 6,000 tons of steel, millions of papers, and thousands of polling stations. The world expected India to fail, but India proved everyone wrong. The ballot paper became a symbol of Indian democracy, but the success of first election created a misunderstanding we still have today. Just because a system worked brilliantly for one era does not mean that it will work forever, because Indian politics was also changing with time. By the 1970s, 80s and 90s, elections had become much more competitive, and it was no longer an era where only one party dominated the political system. Political power became much more valuable, and people discovered a weakness. If the entire elections depends on one physical box, controlling that box means controlling the votes. This created booth capturing. Armed groups could take over polling stations, threaten officials, and fill the ballot boxes themselves. The vote existed on paper, but the voter disappeared. This became a serious problem in several regions, especially parts of Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and West Bengal. One common argument is machines can fail, paper cannot. But history actually tells us something different. Paper systems also fail. They just fail very differently. In the year 2000, the United States presidential election, the world's most powerful democracy, faced a massive controversy in Florida. The issue was not hacking, it was ballot design. How voters actually marked their choices, how machines interpreted those markings, how officials counted disputed votes. Millions of Americans cast votes, but many were actually not recorded properly. In Poland's 2014 elections, confusing ballot designs contributed to rise in invalid votes and allegations of manipulation. In South Korea, the story was the same. Some polling stations faced ballot shortages, forcing voters to wait because there were not enough ballot papers available. These examples actually show something important. The debate is not technology versus perfection, because perfection actually does not exist even with EVMs. The debate is which problems can a system reduce. India's shift to EVMs was not a sudden experiment. The first trials happened in Kerala in 1982, and the machines were gradually introduced. Only in 2004 did India conduct an entire general election through EVMs. And there is an interesting detail about that election. The government that introduced nationwide EVM voting lost power. The machine did not protect the ruling party, it replaced the ruling party. EVMs solved the specific problems from the ballot era. A voter could no longer accidentally invalidate their vote by marking incorrectly. Counting became faster. Thousands of tons of paper was no longer required. And most importantly, booth capturing became much harder. With a ballot box, someone could stuff hundreds of votes quickly. With an EVM, votes cannot simply be dumped into a box. So the nature of manipulation changed to almost impossible. Now, none of this means that citizens should blindly trust any election system. Questioning institutions is a part of democracy. Transparency matters, accountability matters, and no system should survive only because of the argument of, trust us. This is why India introduced the VVPAT system. A voter presses a button on the EVM and receives a paper verification of the vote. It combines electronic efficiency with physical verification. The conversation should always be, how do we improve trust, not how do we return to the problems we already solved. The story of ballot papers in India is not a story of failure. It is actually a story of success. The ballot box helped a poor, newly independent India prove that democracy was indeed possible. It gave millions of Indians their first political voice. It deserves an important place in our history. But countries evolve, systems evolve. A solution designed for India in 1952 cannot automatically be the best solution for India in 2026. Today, India manages elections at a scale humanity has never seen before and probably will never see after this as well. Nearly a billion voters, millions of officials, hundreds of thousands of polling stations. It is madness. The question is not whether the past was good or bad. The question is whether the past can handle the present. India did not move beyond ballot papers because democracy became weaker. India moved beyond them because democracy became much bigger. And sometimes the greatest proof that a system succeeded is that the country it helped build eventually outgrows it.